What if I told you that an ancient artifact, buried for over 2,000 years, might hold the secret to a technology we thought was invented centuries later? Picture this: a simple clay jar about the size of your fist, sealed with a stopper made of asphalt. Inside, a copper cylinder wraps around an iron rod, all carefully preserved in the sands of what was once Mesopotamia. To the untrained eye, it looks unremarkable, but to archaeologists and historians, it's one of the most baffling discoveries ever made: the Baghdad Battery. This unassuming object, dated to around 200 BC, has sparked debates, wild theories, and even outright disbelief. Because if it really is what some claim, a working ancient battery, then our understanding of history's technological timeline might be completely wrong. Think about that for a moment. We're taught that the first true batteries were invented in the 18th century by Alessandro Volta. But here, in the dust of an ancient civilization, lies something that seems to defy that narrative. Was it really used to generate electricity, or was its purpose something else entirely? The truth is, no one knows for sure, and that's what makes this mystery so captivating. Over the years, scholars have proposed everything from electroplating gold to medicinal applications, even mystical rituals. But with no written records to confirm its use, the Baghdad Battery remains an enigma wrapped in layers of time and speculation. So today, we're diving deep into this archaeological puzzle. We'll explore the competing theories, the heated controversies, and the tantalizing possibilities that keep historians up at night. Could the ancients have harnessed electricity long before we ever thought possible? Or is there a simpler explanation hiding in plain sight? Whatever the answer, the story of the Baghdad Battery isn't just about a curious artifact, it's a reminder of how much we still don't know about the ingenuity of those who came before us. And by the end of this journey, you might just see history in a whole new light. The story of the Baghdad Battery truly begins in 1936, when German archaeologist Wilhelm König was excavating near the ancient village of Rabu, just outside modern-day Baghdad. Digging through layers of history, he stumbled upon something unexpected: a cluster of peculiar clay jars, each roughly the size of a tall drinking glass. At first glance, they might have seemed like ordinary storage containers, but König noticed something unusual. The jars were sealed with asphalt plugs, and inside, a copper cylinder was carefully fitted around an iron rod, almost like a primitive electrical cell. Dating these artifacts has been tricky, but most experts place them somewhere between 250 BC and 650 CE, a span covering both the Parthian and Sassanian empires. That means these objects could be as old as 2,000 years, centuries before the first known modern batteries appeared. And here's where things get even more intriguing. When König examined the jars, he found traces of an acidic residue like vinegar or wine lining the interior. That's a critical detail, because if you fill a container like this with an acidic liquid, it becomes a rudimentary battery capable of producing a small but measurable electric current. Now imagine holding one of these jars in your hands. The craftsmanship is simple but deliberate, the copper and iron arranged in a way that suggests purpose, not accident. Was this an ancient experiment, a tool, or something else entirely? The fact that multiple batteries were found together hints they weren't one-offs but part of a broader practice. Yet despite decades of study, no one has found definitive proof of how or why they were used. That lingering question is what makes the Baghdad Battery more than just an artifact. It's a whisper from the past, daring us to reconsider what ancient civilizations might have known. When Wilhelm König first proposed his electroplating theory, it sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. He suggested these ancient jars might have been used to apply thin layers of gold onto silver objects, a technique that would have seemed impossibly advanced for the time. Picture a Mesopotamian artisan dipping a silver statue into a solution, using the battery's weak current to bond gold particles onto its surface. The result: Gilded treasures fit for kings, crafted with what we'd consider proto-science. And here's where it gets fascinating. We know the Parthians and Sassanians were master metalworkers. Their intricate jewelry and ceremonial objects often featured gold accents, some so finely applied that modern experts still debate how they achieved such precision without electricity. Could the Baghdad Battery explain it? Replicas built by researchers have shown these devices can produce around 1 volt of electricity, enough for basic electroplating if used in series. Imagine a dozen of these jars linked together, their combined output capable of delicate gilding work, but skeptics raise compelling counterpoints. No electroplated artifacts from that era have been definitively tied to these batteries. The acidic residue inside could have come from anything: preserved food, perfume, even medicine. And while the technology is simple, the conceptual leap to electroplating feels enormous for a society with no known framework for understanding electricity. Yet there's an irresistible allure to the idea. Ancient texts describe shining gold techniques, and some recovered objects show gold layers too thin for conventional hammered gilding. Maybe the truth lies in the middle. Perhaps these batteries were part of a larger, lost process. A secret known only to master craftsmen, their methods fading into history along with the civilizations that perfected them. Whether König's theory holds or not, it forces us to reconsider the innovative spirit of ancient cultures and the tantalizing possibility that they might have stumbled upon electrical secrets centuries ahead of their time. While the electroplating theory offers an exciting possibility, many archaeologists remain unconvinced, and their skepticism isn't without merit. One glaring hole in the argument: the complete absence of wires, connectors, or any other components needed to complete an electrical circuit. Modern electroplating relies on conductive pathways to transfer current, yet no such tools have ever been found alongside these jars. Without them, it's like having a light bulb with no socket, a promising idea but functionally incomplete. Then there's the silence of the historical record. Despite meticulous records of metalworking techniques from ancient Mesopotamia, not a single text mentions electricity, gilding with currents, or anything resembling these batteries. Compare that to their detailed descriptions of lost wax casting or mercury amalgamation methods they documented proudly. If electroplating was their secret, why wouldn't they boast about it? Even more damning, no surviving artifacts from the period show the telltale signs of electroplating. The gold layers we've found are consistent with far simpler techniques, like foil application or fire gilding, which use heat and mercury to bond metals, a process well within their known technological grasp. But perhaps the most persuasive counterargument comes from practicality. Replicas of the Baghdad Battery produce barely enough current to power a tiny LED, hardly sufficient for large-scale gilding. Ancient artisans could have achieved similar results faster with tried-and-true methods, leaving little incentive to experiment with finicky, low-output devices. Some researchers even argue the jars might have held sacred scrolls, with the iron and copper acting as protective ritual elements rather than conductive materials. The debate reflects a deeper divide in archaeology, between those who see ancient innovation as potentially limitless and those who caution against projecting modern ideas onto the past. After all, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and for now, the Baghdad Battery's true purpose remains shrouded in more mystery than voltage. What if the Baghdad Battery wasn't meant for metalwork at all, but for medicine? Another compelling theory suggests these ancient jars might have been early electrotherapy devices, used to soothe pain or treat ailments long before modern science understood electricity's healing potential. The idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Ancient Greek and Roman physicians wrote extensively about the numbing effects of electric fish, like the torpedo ray, to relieve headaches or joint pain. Scribonius Largus, a 1st-century Roman doctor, even prescribed standing on a live electric fish to cure gout. Now, imagine a healer in Mesopotamia holding one of these batteries, its faint current pulsing through a patient's aching muscles. The setup would have been simple, the acidic solution activating the iron and copper, producing a tingling sensation not unlike the shock of those Mediterranean fish. Without understanding the mechanics, ancient doctors might have noticed the calming effect of that subtle current, reaching for these jars the way we'd grab a heating pad or TENS unit today. There's an eerie logic to it. Archaeological evidence shows the Parthians and Sassanians were advanced in medicine, with texts detailing treatments for everything from fractures to fevers. Could electrotherapy have been another tool in their kit? Some researchers point to the battery's design as a clue. The asphalt seal would have insulated the user, directing the current outward, while the compact size makes it portable enough for clinical use. Even the voltage lines up replicas produce a mild shock similar to the torpedo ray's output, enough to interrupt pain signals without causing harm. Yet for all its appeal, the medical theory faces hurdles. No surviving texts from the region mention electrotherapy, and no batteries have been found in clear medical contexts like tombs of physicians or healing temples. Skeptics argue that if these were healing devices, why aren't they depicted in art or mentioned alongside other remedies? But that absence might just reflect how knowledge was guarded or lost. After all, the Baghdad Batteries were buried for millennia before we stumbled upon them. Maybe their true purpose faded long before the jars themselves crumbled into obscurity. Whether they were ancient TENS units or something else entirely, the medical hypothesis reminds us that innovation isn't always linear. Cultures across history have stumbled upon discoveries they couldn't fully explain, harnessing phenomena they didn't yet understand. And if these jars really were Mesopotamia's answer to pain relief, they stand as a testament to human ingenuity, a spark of brilliance, literally and figuratively, lighting the way through the darkness of the past. Curious researchers have put the medical theory to the test by reconstructing exact replicas of the Baghdad Battery, filling the clay jars with vinegar or grape juice as potential ancient electrolytes. When connected, these devices generate a faint current between 0.8 and 2 volts comparable to the mild shock from touching your tongue to a 9-volt battery. That's barely enough to power a modern wristwatch, but here's the fascinating part. It's remarkably similar to the voltage produced by electric fish like the torpedo ray, which ancient Mediterranean cultures deliberately used for pain relief. In controlled experiments, volunteers reported a distinct tingling sensation when the replica batteries were applied to their skin. Some even described temporary numbness in the area, suggesting these devices could have plausibly functioned as primitive pain blockers. Physical therapist Dr. Jonathan Carter, who participated in one such study, noted that prolonged exposure to the current caused subtle muscle contractions not unlike those produced by modern transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, or TENS units. It wouldn't cure disease, he admitted, but for someone suffering from arthritis or chronic pain 2,000 years ago, that brief relief might have felt like magic. Yet skeptics highlight crucial gaps in this hypothesis. While the batteries can produce physiological effects, no archaeological evidence links them directly to medical practice. No healing temples or physicians' kits have yielded these jars, and ancient Mesopotamian medical texts, meticulous in detailing treatments from herbal poultices to bone setting, never mention electrical therapies. Even more puzzling is the lack of electrodes or applicators among the artifacts. Without conductive rods or pads to direct the current, applying these batteries therapeutically would have been haphazard at best, like trying to charge a phone without a cable. The biggest obstacle might be intent. Just because the batteries could numb pain doesn't prove that's why they were made. Historian Dr. Miriam Farsi argues, we can't assume ancient people interpreted tingling sensations the way we do. Without written records calling these devices healing tools, we're projecting modern medical frameworks onto objects that might have had entirely different symbolic or ritual purposes. She points to the asphalt seals, far more elaborate than necessary for simple conduction, as possible evidence they were meant to contain something sacred rather than functional. What makes the medical theory so tantalizing and frustrating is its plausibility without proof, like finding a screwdriver in an ancient toolbox and debating whether it turned bolts or pried open oyster shells. The Baghdad Battery's design allows multiple interpretations. Maybe the truth lies in a combination of uses: a tool that began as one thing and was repurposed through generations, its original function lost to time. Or perhaps we'll never know, leaving us to marvel at how a humble clay jar could simultaneously embody cutting-edge science and enduring mystery. Among the most captivating theories is that these mysterious artifacts weren't tools of science at all, but objects of divine power. Imagine walking into a dimly lit temple in ancient Mesopotamia, the air thick with incense as priests move silently between towering statues. Suddenly, the idol of a god begins to emit a low, eerie hum, or worse, it seems to speak. To worshippers, this would have been undeniable proof of the deity's presence, and if the Baghdad batteries were wired to hidden copper plates inside those statues, they could have produced just enough current to create vibrations, making the stone figures appear to come alive with otherworldly voices. Temple trickery wasn't uncommon in antiquity. The Greek engineer Hero of Alexandria described mechanical devices that used steam and hydraulics to make temple doors open automatically or altars ignite on their own, stunts designed to stun worshippers into devotion. Even earlier, Egyptian priests reportedly rigged statues with tubes and hidden chambers to simulate a god's voice during ceremonies. If cultures across the Mediterranean were engineering illusions to inspire awe, why wouldn't the Parthians or Sassanians harness electricity's uncanny effects? The mild current from these batteries, channeled through thin wires, could have made metal idols vibrate against resonant cavities, producing ghostly whispers or metallic ringing. But the ritual use might have gone deeper than theatrics. Ancient texts from the region describe sacred divination bowls, used to communicate with spirits, objects often made of conductive metals like bronze or copper. Scholars speculate that if a battery were placed beneath such a vessel, the electrochemical reaction could have created subtle surface disturbances, making liquid ripple or oil patterns shift mysteriously. To a priest interpreting omens, these minute changes might have held cosmic significance, a literal spark of the divine. Not everyone's convinced, of course. Critics note that no statues or temple artifacts have been found with wiring or conductive attachments, and the batteries themselves lack obvious mounts for ritual use. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, especially when dealing with perishable materials like plant-based wires or thin metal strips that could have corroded to dust over centuries. What remains haunting is the sheer psychological power such devices would have wielded. In a world where lightning was the wrath of gods and static shocks were invisible spirits, a priest who could summon electricity on demand wouldn't just be a technologist, they'd be a sorcerer. Whether the Baghdad batteries were holy tools or holy hoaxes, their potential role in ritual underscores humanity's oldest impulse, to wield the inexplicable in service of the sacred. And if even one of these jars sat on a temple altar, pulsing with unseen energy, it would rewrite not just the history of technology, but the history of belief itself. The discovery site of the Baghdad batteries adds another layer of intrigue to the mystery because these artifacts weren't unearthed in a workshop, a healer's home, or even a temple. They were found in the basement of a rather ordinary dwelling in the village of Kujat Rabu near Ctesiphon, the ancient capital of the Parthian Empire. This wasn't a grand palace or a ceremonial complex, just a simple residential area with no obvious signs of special activity, no tools for metalworking, no medical instruments, no religious iconography. Just clay jars tucked away like everyday household items, and that's what makes their purpose so hard to pin down. If they were used for electroplating, why weren't they found near furnaces or artisan quarters? If they were medical devices, where are the accompanying herbs or surgical tools? The lack of contextual clues forces us to consider more mundane possibilities. Maybe they held scrolls sealed with asphalt to protect them from moisture, and the metal components were purely structural. Or perhaps they stored something perishable: perfumes, oils, even fermented beverages, with the copper and iron acting as preservatives. But here's the twist: just because they were found in a domestic setting doesn't mean they were ordinary. Ancient households often doubled as workshops or sacred spaces. A family might have run a small gilding business from home, or a local healer could have treated patients in their living quarters. Even religious practice wasn't confined to temples. Private rituals, ancestor veneration, and household gods were central to daily life. So while the battery's humble location doesn't scream cutting-edge technology, it doesn't rule out specialized use either. The real frustration is the absence of anything else like them. No other sites have yielded similar jars, no texts describe their construction, and no art depicts them in action. For all we know, they could have been a failed experiment, a regional oddity, or even a child's toy. Without more examples or written records, their discovery raises more questions than it answers. And that's the heart of the mystery, not just what they were for, but why we've found so few and in such an unassuming place. The Baghdad Batteries might be relics of something revolutionary, or they might be ancient Mesopotamia's equivalent of a kitchen gadget everyone forgot about. Until we dig up more clues, their secrets stay buried not in tombs or temples, but in the quiet corners of everyday history. Not every ancient mystery requires a high-tech explanation. Sometimes the simplest answer is the most overlooked. Among the quieter theories about the Baghdad Battery is the idea that these jars weren't power sources at all, but protective containers for sacred scrolls. Imagine a scribe carefully rolling a papyrus or parchment inscribed with prayers, spells, or royal decrees, then sealing it inside one of these asphalt-topped vessels. The iron rod and copper cylinder, merely structural reinforcements or ritual elements meant to ward off evil spirits, not conductors of electricity. This theory gains traction from similar finds across the ancient world. In Egypt, sacred texts were often stored in metal-lined boxes to deter insects and moisture, while Mesopotamian temples frequently buried foundation documents with ceremonial metals to invoke divine protection. The acidic residue inside the Baghdad jars could have come from vinegar-soaked cloth wrappings, a common preservative, or even evaporated ritual oils anointed on the scrolls themselves. Without organic remnants surviving, though, we're left reading between the archaeological lines. Critics, however, point to the jar's design flaws as scroll cases. The narrow copper cylinder leaves little room for a rolled document, and the iron rod's placement would have risked puncturing delicate parchment. More damning is the corrosion patterns. Metallurgist Dr. Elena Petrov's analysis revealed pitting consistent with prolonged exposure to acidic liquids, damage unlikely from occasional contact with oiled cloth. If these held scrolls, she argues, we'd expect patina from handling and air exposure, not the electrochemical erosion we're seeing. Yet the scroll theory persists because it reflects a cultural truth. Ancient societies often blended practicality with spirituality. A jar that preserved both ink and divine favor wouldn't be unusual. Maybe the metals weren't accidental inclusions but deliberate sacred symbols: iron for strength, copper for purity, transforming a storage vessel into a talisman. Until we find a sealed jar with contents intact, this theory remains a footnote in the battery debate, but it's a reminder that not every artifact fits neatly into our modern categories. Sometimes a container is just a container until belief turns it into something more. Dr. Arne Egebrecht's experiments in the 1970s brought the Baghdad Battery debate into the modern era with a dramatic flourish. Determined to test Wilhelm König's electroplating theory, the German Egyptologist assembled a team to recreate the ancient jars, filling them with grape juice as a period-accurate electrolyte. Linking 10 of these replicas in series, he claimed to have successfully electroplated a silver statuette with a thin layer of gold, achieving in hours what traditional gilding methods would take days to complete. The results, though controversial, sent ripples through the archaeological community. Here was tangible proof that these unassuming artifacts could function as rudimentary power sources, at least in theory. But Egebrecht's methodology wasn't without flaws. Critics pointed out that his team used modern alligator clips to connect the jars, a convenience the ancients wouldn't have had. More damningly, his lab notes lacked detailed voltage measurements or microscopic analysis of the plated layer, leaving room for doubt. Had the gold truly bonded via electrolysis, or was it merely adhering through some other chemical reaction? Without rigorous documentation, the experiment became a Rorschach test. Believers saw validation, skeptics saw speculation. Other researchers have since tackled the challenge with more precision. In 2003, a team from Discovery Channel's Mythbusters built their own replicas, experimenting with various acidic solutions. Their batteries generated measurable current, but electroplating proved frustratingly inconsistent. Even with 30 jars linked together, the gold deposition was patchy and weak. Lead investigator Jamie Heinemann concluded that while the batteries could produce electricity, their output was too erratic for reliable metalwork. You'd need an entire room full of these things, he noted, and even then, the results wouldn't match the craftsmanship we see in actual Parthian artifacts. Perhaps the most compelling data comes from metallurgist Dr. Marjorie Senechal, who analyzed the crystalline structure of gold layers on genuine Parthian jewelry. Her findings revealed no telltale signs of electrochemical bonding. Instead, the gold showed characteristics consistent with mercury-based fire gilding, a well-documented ancient technique. This doesn't entirely rule out electroplating, but it suggests that if the batteries were used for metalwork, their role was either supplemental or experimental. What these recreations reveal isn't just a technical debate, but a cultural one. Even if the Baghdad batteries could electroplate, would artisans have bothered? Consider the sheer labor involved, crafting dozens of jars, maintaining the electrolyte, painstakingly linking them with makeshift wires, all for results that traditional methods achieved faster. Innovation often follows the path of least resistance, and without a clear advantage, it's hard to imagine these devices becoming widespread. Yet the experiments also highlight something profound: human curiosity transcends time. Whether the ancients used these jars for gilding, healing, or something else entirely, the fact that we're still testing their possibilities today connects us across millennia. Every replica built, every voltage measured, is a testament to our shared drive to unravel mysteries, and to the enduring allure of a 2,000-year-old puzzle that refuses to surrender its secrets. The power output of these ancient batteries might seem laughably small by modern standards, each jar producing just a fraction of a single volt. But when you break down the science, their design reveals surprising sophistication. Picture this: a single Baghdad battery filled with vinegar or fermented grape juice generates between 0.8 and 2 volts of electricity. That's roughly the same as the shock you'd feel from licking a 9-volt battery, or the energy it takes to power a digital wristwatch for a few seconds. Not exactly groundbreaking until you consider the next piece of the puzzle. Archaeologists have speculated that linking multiple batteries in series, copper to iron to copper, could have multiplied their output. 10 jars wired together might have produced 8 to 20 volts, enough to deliver a noticeable jolt or sustain a weak current for basic tasks. Replicas built by researchers at Smith College demonstrated this principle perfectly. When connected in sequence, the batteries could power a small LED or even induce a tingling sensation strong enough to mimic the numbing effects of electric fish. The real question isn't whether they could generate electricity, it's whether they did and to what end. But here's the catch, these batteries weren't exactly long-lasting powerhouses. Without a constant supply of fresh electrolyte like citrus juice or vinegar, the chemical reaction would fizzle out within hours. The iron rods, corroded by the acidic solution, would need frequent replacement, and the copper cylinders would degrade over time. Compare that to modern batteries, which are engineered for stability and longevity, and the limitations become stark. Ancient users would have faced a relentless cycle of maintenance, refilling jars, swapping out components, and troubleshooting inconsistent output. Hardly the stuff of industrial-scale electroplating or medical practice, yet the ingenuity lies in the simplicity. These weren't precision instruments, they were likely improvised from everyday materials. The copper could have been salvaged from old coins or vessels, the iron from tools or weapons, the asphalt from local seeps. Even the electrolytes were probably kitchen staples, spoiled wine, fruit acids, or diluted vinegar. In a world without textbooks or engineering manuals, that's a remarkable feat of trial and error innovation. Maybe the Baghdad batteries were never meant to be reliable power sources. Maybe they were fleeting experiments, their creators fascinated by the strange tingling in their fingers or the eerie glow of electrified metal curiosities rather than tools. The voltage debate forces us to confront a deeper truth about ancient technology. We're often quick to assume that if something could function a certain way, it must have been used that way. But history is messy, and human curiosity doesn't always follow practical lines. Perhaps these jars were classroom demonstrations, ritual objects, or even toys. Their true significance lost because we're searching for answers in the language of modern science, not the whispers of a 2,000-year-old workshop. Whatever their purpose, their lingering mystery is a reminder that the past refuses to be easily categorized. Sometimes the most fascinating artifacts aren't the ones that change history, but the ones that challenge how we think about it. The secret to unlocking the Baghdad Battery's potential might lie in something as ordinary as a bottle of salad dressing or a glass of wine, the key ingredient. Natural acids, common household substances that could have transformed these clay jars into working electrochemical cells. Vinegar, lemon juice, even fermented grape juice would have been readily available to ancient Mesopotamians, and each has been tested by modern researchers with fascinating results. Take vinegar, for instance, a staple in ancient kitchens, made from spoiled wine or fermented dates. Its acetic acid content makes it a surprisingly effective electrolyte. When poured into a replica Baghdad battery, vinegar generates a steady current of around 1 volt, enough to produce a faint but measurable charge. But here's the twist. Experiments show that older, more concentrated vinegar, like the kind left to ferment for months, works even better. This raises an intriguing possibility. What if these weren't just accidental power sources, but carefully calibrated devices? Ancient artisans might have noticed that aged vinegar produced stronger effects, deliberately selecting the most potent batches for their experiments. Lemon juice, though less common in Mesopotamia, packs an even stronger punch with its citric acid. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania found that lemon juice electrolytes could push the battery's output closer to 2 volts, enough to make a small LED flicker. But here's where practicality comes into play. Lemons weren't native to the region, and while trade routes might have brought occasional citrus fruits, they'd have been expensive luxuries. That makes vinegar or grape juice far more plausible candidates for widespread use. And then there's grape juice specifically, the fermented kind. Wine was a daily commodity in ancient Mesopotamia, and its natural tartaric acid creates a reliable electrochemical reaction. In one experiment, a team from the National Geographic Society filled replica batteries with diluted wine, achieving currents comparable to vinegar. But the real surprise came when they tried spoiled wine. The bacterial byproducts of fermentation actually increased the acidity, boosting the battery's output. It's a tantalizing thought. What if these ancient batteries were born from happy accidents? A forgotten jar of wine left to sour, suddenly humming with invisible energy, an observation that could have sparked centuries of experimentation. Yet not all acids are created equal. Some researchers have tested stronger substances like sulfuric acid derived from natural salts with dramatic results. These harsher electrolytes can produce higher voltages, but there's no evidence ancient people had access to or knowledge of such refined chemicals. The beauty of the vinegar and wine theory is its simplicity. These were substances anyone could have stumbled upon, mixed and tested without specialized knowledge. The electrolyte question isn't just about chemistry, it's about context. If these batteries were everyday objects, their power source would have needed to be equally mundane. Vinegar and wine fit that bill perfectly, woven into the fabric of daily life. Maybe that's the most compelling clue of all. The Baghdad Battery's genius wasn't in some lost advanced science. It was in seeing the extraordinary potential of the ordinary, a lesson that resonates just as powerfully today. The Baghdad Battery might be the most famous ancient electrical mystery, but it's far from the only one. Half a world away, in the sands of Egypt, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that some claim rival its ingenuity, objects like the so-called dendrolite, a series of carvings from the Hathor temple depicting what appear to be bulb-shaped devices cradled in lotus flowers with snaking tendrils resembling modern electrical wires. To some fringe theorists, these images are smoking gun proof of ancient electricity, suggesting the Egyptians harnessed illumination centuries before Edison. But mainstream scholars push back hard, arguing these lights are symbolic representations of the sun god emerging from a lotus blossom, part of a rich tradition of spiritual iconography, not technical blueprints. The divide between these interpretations speaks to a bigger challenge in archaeology, distinguishing between literal technology and metaphorical art. Take the lotus carvings without accompanying physical artifacts or textual explanations. Their meaning is wide open to speculation. Unlike the Baghdad Battery, which at least has a tangible, testable design, the dendra reliefs exist purely as visual enigmas. That hasn't stopped creative experiments, though. Engineer Walter Gahn famously built a working dendra lamp in the 1980s using a copper-filled glass bulb and gold leaf filaments, proving the concept was physically possible, but not that the Egyptians actually did it. Elsewhere, artifacts like the Nazca gold figures from Peru have been similarly mythologized. These tiny, wing-shaped objects bear an uncanny resemblance to modern aircraft, leading some to theorize they were models of ancient flying machines or even electrical components. Yet metallurgic analysis reveals their stylized renditions of birds or fish, their sleek forms likely representing spiritual symbols rather than engineering diagrams. The pattern repeats across cultures, from India's Vimana, text sometimes misquoted as describing pre-modern spacecraft, to Mesoamerican jade carvings interpreted as ancient astronauts by pop culture. What makes the Baghdad Battery unique isn't just its physical form, but its electrochemical plausibility. Unlike purely symbolic objects, its design aligns with basic galvanic principles, even if its intended use remains unclear. That's why it stands apart from speculative artifacts. It's not just a shape that looks like modern tech, but a functional device that could have worked, whether or not its creators understood why. The lesson here isn't just about electricity, but about how easily we project our own technological frameworks onto the past. Perhaps the most telling contrast lies in evidence beyond the objects themselves. While the Baghdad Battery's acidic residue suggests deliberate use, no similar chemical traces accompany the dendra carvings or Nazca figures. Without contextual clues, tools, writings, or residues, these artifacts remain floating mysteries, their interpretations shaped more by our modern imaginations than by ancient intent. In the end, the real first battery might not be a single invention, but a scattered series of accidental discoveries, some forgotten, some mythologized, and some like those clay jars near Baghdad waiting patiently for us to unravel their secrets. While the Baghdad Battery stands alone in its design, other ancient devices hint at a broader fascination with energy and mechanics, none more striking than Greece's Antikythera mechanism. Pulled from a shipwreck in 1901, this corroded bronze artifact initially seemed unremarkable until researchers realized it was an intricate, gear-driven calculator capable of predicting astronomical events with startling accuracy. Often called the world's first analog computer, its precision engineering suggests a level of technical sophistication historians once thought impossible for its time, around 100 BC. What makes it relevant to the battery mystery? The same question hangs over both. How did such advanced knowledge emerge, and why did it vanish? The Antikythera mechanism's gears share no direct link to electricity, but they reveal something equally profound. Ancient civilizations were capable of far more complex innovation than we've credited them for. If Greek engineers could craft a device to track lunar cycles centuries before the modern clock, why couldn't Mesopotamians experiment with basic electrochemical reactions? Both artifacts defy the linear narrative of technological progress, suggesting pockets of specialized knowledge that flourished and were later lost to time. Then there's the curious case of the Baghdad Battery's spiritual cousin, the so-called Dendera light from Egypt's Hathor temple. Carved into the temple walls, these bulb-shaped reliefs feature snake-like filaments inside elongated vessels, images some interpret as ancient light bulbs powered by an unknown energy source. Mainstream Egyptologists dismiss this as pure fantasy, arguing the carvings depict the sun god emerging from a lotus surrounded by protective serpents. But the resemblance to early 20th century Crookes tubes proto-light bulbs used in electrical experiments is undeniably eerie. Could there be a middle ground? Perhaps these carvings weren't literal blueprints but metaphors inspired by observable phenomena. Ancient Egyptians used electric fish like the Nile catfish in medicine, and the shocks they produced might have been mythologized as divine energy. Similarly, the Antikythera mechanism's gears could have been an outlier, a brilliant one-off, rather than evidence of widespread technical mastery. The thread connecting these artifacts isn't necessarily a shared understanding of electricity, but something more universal: humanity's relentless drive to harness the invisible forces around them. Whether through gears, acids, or sacred symbols, ancient innovators sought to manipulate their world with the tools they had. And that's the real lesson of the Baghdad Battery. It might not prove the existence of an ancient power grid, but it reminds us that curiosity knows no era, and that the past is always more inventive than we assume. For every theory about the Baghdad Battery's advanced purpose, there's a counter-argument grounded in sheer simplicity. Some archaeologists insist these jars were nothing more than everyday storage containers, vessels for holding scrolls, spices, or precious oils, and that their so-called battery configuration is just a quirk of decay and coincidence. Imagine a clay pot left undisturbed for centuries, its contents slowly reacting with the metal components inside. Over time, organic acids from spoiled food or fermented liquids could have eaten away at the iron rod, while the copper cylinder oxidized in just the right way to resemble an intentional electrical cell. To skeptics, Occam's razor applies here with brutal clarity. The simplest explanation that these were ordinary jars repurposed by time is often the right one. Take the asphalt seals, for instance. While they seem elaborate for a basic storage jar, they'd make perfect sense if the contents needed protection from moisture or pests. Ancient Mesopotamians used asphalt extensively for waterproofing everything from boats to bricks, so its presence here isn't extraordinary. Even the copper and iron might have had mundane roles, structural reinforcements to keep the jar stable, or ceremonial additions to sanctify whatever was stored inside. Without explicit evidence linking them to electrical use, why assume they're anything more? The decay theory gains traction when you examine similar artifacts from the period. Dozens of nondescript clay jars have been found across the region with metal linings or fittings, none of which sparked ancient battery speculation. Only the Baghdad examples, with their serendipitous combination of corrosion and design, became legendary. Metallurgist Dr. Liam Hartley points out that random electrochemical reactions aren't uncommon in archaeology. Bury almost any two dissimilar metals with an organic acid for 2,000 years, and you'll get measurable voltage, he notes. That doesn't mean someone planned it. Yet even the skeptics admit there's a tantalizing what-if at play. The jar's components could function as a battery, even if that wasn't their original intent. Maybe an ancient artisan noticed the tingling sensation when handling a corroded jar and experimented further, or maybe the effect went entirely unnoticed. Archaeology rarely deals in certainties, only probabilities, and in a field where imagination often outpaces evidence, the Baghdad Battery serves as a cautionary tale. Not every artifact is a puzzle, and sometimes a pot is just a pot. Unless, of course, it isn't. The Baghdad Battery's enigmatic nature has made it a magnet for wild speculation, often overshadowing legitimate research with flashy conspiracy theories. Ancient astronaut enthusiasts, for instance, point to these jars as proof of extraterrestrial intervention, arguing that such advanced technology couldn't possibly have been conceived by humans 2,000 years ago. Documentaries love to zoom in on the battery's design while dramatic narration asks, "Did aliens teach our ancestors the secrets of electricity?" It's a seductive narrative, but one that ignores a fundamental truth. Human ingenuity is far more inventive than we often give it credit for. The lost super-civilization trope is equally pervasive. Some theorists claim the Baghdad Battery is a relic of Atlantis or another advanced society wiped from history. They imagine sprawling ancient power grids or mystical energy devices, despite zero archaeological evidence supporting such ideas. What's frustrating isn't the creativity, it's the dismissal of actual Mesopotamian innovation. The Parthians and Sassanians were master engineers, crafting intricate water clocks, precision lenses, and even early forms of chemical batteries without needing mythical influences. Scholars walk a tightrope between curiosity and credibility, while open to unconventional ideas like the medical or ritual theories. They demand evidence. Fringe arguments often crumble under scrutiny. Take the claim that the batteries powered electric lights in temples. No wiring, switches, or bulbs have ever been found in Mesopotamian ruins. Contrast that with the meticulous documentation of oil lamps and torches, which were the era's actual light sources. Yet the allure of these myths persists because they tap into a deeper human desire to believe the past was grander, stranger, or more connected to our modern world than it really was. The Baghdad Battery becomes a blank slate, projected with everything from alien tech to Atlantean power cores. Lost in the noise is the quieter, more profound reality that ordinary people, working with ordinary materials, might have stumbled upon extraordinary principles through observation and trial. Perhaps the biggest casualty of these sensationalized theories is context. They reduce the richness of ancient Mesopotamia to a backdrop for sci-fi fantasies, overshadowing its genuine achievements. Cuneiform tablets detail advanced mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, real breakthroughs that don't need embellishment. The Baghdad Battery, whether a tool or a curiosity, belongs to that legacy of experimentation. It doesn't require aliens or lost empires to be remarkable. Sometimes the truth is fascinating enough. Picture an ancient temple where the massive bronze doors creak open not by human hands, but by the unseen force of electricity. Hidden beneath the stone floor, a series of Baghdad batteries connected with copper wires channel their combined current into a simple mechanism, perhaps a magnetized lever or a primitive motor. slowly pivoting the doors as worshippers approach. It's a scene straight out of historical fantasy, but could such a setup have been possible? The idea isn't entirely far-fetched. We know the Greeks and Romans built elaborate automata using hydraulics and steam, so the leap to basic electrical devices isn't unimaginable. A dozen linked batteries could produce enough current to power a small electromagnetic switch, and while no direct evidence of such systems exists, the absence of evidence isn't always evidence of absence, especially when dealing with perishable materials like plant fiber wiring that wouldn't survive millennia underground. But let's ground this in what we do know. The Antikythera mechanism proves the ancients were capable of astonishing mechanical precision, while Hero of Alexandria's writings describe automated temple doors powered by steam and counterweights. If they could engineer those marvels, why not experiment with electrical triggers? The challenge lies in scale. While a single Baghdad battery produces a faint current, linking multiple units in series, as proven by modern replicas, could generate enough voltage to activate simple devices. A temple alarm might have used the current to vibrate a thin metal plate, creating a resonant hum to warn of intruders. Or consider a sacred chamber where electrified idols delivered mild shocks to the uninitiated, reinforcing their divine power through sensory illusion. The psychological impact alone would have been staggering, yet the hard limits of this technology can't be ignored. Unlike modern batteries designed for sustained output, these jars would have required constant maintenance, refilling electrolytes, replacing corroded rods, and troubleshooting inconsistent connections. And without standardized voltage or insulated wiring, reliability would have been a persistent headache. Compare that to straightforward mechanical solutions like ropes and pulleys, which were durable, predictable, and required no specialized knowledge. That's why most archaeologists argue that even if the Baghdad Battery could power devices, the effort would have outweighed the benefit. Innovation follows the path of least resistance, and in a world without conductive metals or circuit theory, electricity would have been more curiosity than convenience. Still, the possibility lingers like static in the air. Perhaps these batteries weren't meant for grand temple mechanisms but for smaller, more intimate tricks. A healer might have used them to make a patient's muscles twitch during rituals, or a craftsman could have experimented with electrified molds to create unique textures in metalwork. The absence of large-scale applications doesn't rule out niche uses after all. The first steam engines were novelty toys long before they powered factories. What makes the Baghdad Battery so tantalizing isn't just what it was, but what it could have been. A spark of potential in an age we're still learning to understand. What if the Baghdad Battery wasn't about electricity at all, but about something far more volatile? Picture this. A priest in a dimly lit chamber pours vinegar into one of these clay jars, and within moments, tiny bubbles begin to rise from the iron rod. The air fills with the sharp scent of hydrogen gas, a byproduct of the electrochemical reaction between the acid and the metals. To modern eyes, it's basic chemistry, but to an ancient observer, it might have seemed like magic. Could these jars have been early hydrogen generators, their flammable gas harnessed for sacred rituals or theatrical displays? The idea isn't as outlandish as it sounds. We know the ancients were fascinated by chemical transformations. Egyptian alchemists recorded experiments with natron and sulfur, while Chinese scholars perfected gunpowder centuries later. Even in Mesopotamia, texts describe temple rites involving miraculous mists and breath of the gods, phrases that could easily describe hydrogen gas igniting in the open air. Imagine a ceremony where priests used these batteries to produce invisible fumes, then touch them with a torch, creating sudden bursts of flame to awe worshippers. The effect would have been dramatic, a silent, heatless fire leaping from seemingly empty vessels, perfect for invoking divine presence. But hydrogen wasn't the only possibility. Mixing the battery's acidic electrolyte with certain salts like those found in Dead Sea deposits could have produced chlorine gas, a substance later used in bleaching and purification. Ancient Mesopotamians valued white textiles for religious ceremonies, and chlorine's whitening properties might have been discovered by accident. A jar left near salty water, its reaction releasing a pungent, disinfecting vapor. Could that explain why some batteries were found stored together as if part of a larger chemical process? Then there's the spectacle angle. Combine hydrogen with powdered metals like copper or iron, and you get vibrant colored flames. Early pyrotechnics. The Parthians were known for lavish public displays, and even primitive fireworks could have cemented their reputation as masters of illusion. A handful of batteries, a dash of metal filings, and suddenly you've got emerald green or crimson fire dancing atop temple altars. No wonder some theories suggest these devices were guarded secrets, their output more ritual than revolutionary. Yet these theories, while compelling, run into the same hurdle as the electrical ones, a lack of direct evidence. No ancient texts mention gas collection or flame rituals using such jars, and no residue analyzers have confirmed chlorine or hydrogen byproducts. The absence doesn't disprove the ideas after all. Many ancient techniques were passed down orally or deliberately encoded, but it leaves them lingering in the realm of could have been rather than was. What's undeniable is that the Baghdad Battery's chemistry aligns with known ancient experimentation. From Greek fire to Chinese fireworks, cultures worldwide tinkered with reactive substances, often blending science and spirituality. Whether these jars were part of that tradition remains uncertain, but their very existence invites us to rethink the boundaries of ancient innovation. Maybe they weren't batteries in the modern sense, but tools in a broader, more mysterious chemical toolkit, one where the line between ritual and experiment was as thin as the flame of a hydrogen fire. Could the Baghdad Battery's design have traveled along the bustling trade routes that linked Mesopotamia to distant civilizations? Picture the Silk Road snaking across continents, not just carrying silks and spices, but perhaps exchanging something far more valuable, technological ideas. Ancient China's Han Dynasty, for instance, left behind artifacts that raise eyebrows: bronze vessels with iron inserts, sometimes found with acidic residues eerily similar to the Baghdad jars. Coincidence, maybe, but when you consider that Persian traders were bridging Mesopotamia and China as early as 500 BCE, suddenly the idea of shared knowledge doesn't seem so far-fetched. Then there's India's contribution. Texts like the Artha Shastra, written around 300 BCE, describe conductive alloys and chemical processes that could have inspired battery experiments. Indian metallurgists were masters of extracting and purifying metals, techniques that would have been highly prized in Mesopotamia's gold-working workshops. If a merchant caravan carried samples of these innovations westward, could a curious artisan in Baghdad have reverse-engineered them into something new? The timing fits. These cultures were in direct contact during the Parthian era, trading not just goods but ideas. But here's where the plot thickens. While trade routes explain the possibility of borrowed technology, they don't prove it. No battery-like artifacts have been found along these routes, no missing links to confirm the transmission, and the designs differ tellingly. Chinese vessels were often larger, with less precise seals, while Indian conductive materials were typically used for adornment, not electrochemical experiments. Unless we uncover a caravan rest stop littered with half-finished battery prototypes, this theory remains in the realm of educated speculation. Yet the absence of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of absence. Ancient trade was as much about intangible exchange as tangible goods. A traveling metalsmith might have demonstrated an electroplating trick in a Babylonian marketplace, sparking local experimentation without leaving physical traces. Or consider the role of conquered peoples when Alexander the Great's armies marched east. They carried Greek science into Persia, where it mingled with local knowledge. Could a similar cultural collision have birthed the Baghdad Battery? The the most compelling argument for cross-cultural influence lies in the materials themselves. The battery's asphalt sealant points to the Dead Sea, its copper possibly mined in Oman, its iron traded from Anatolia. Every component was a product of long-distance exchange, assembled in a region that thrived on synthesis. Maybe the Baghdad Battery wasn't a single civilization's breakthrough, but a hybrid, a testament to what happens when ideas collide along well-trodden trade routes. Whether by accident or design, it stands as a reminder that innovation has always been a collective endeavor, as mobile as the merchants who carried it. The very fragility that makes the Baghdad Battery so fascinating is also why so few survive today. These clay jars, while sturdy enough for daily use, were never designed to withstand 2 millennia buried in the acidic soils of Mesopotamia. Picture an archaeologist's trowel scraping away centuries of dirt, only to reveal a crumbled mass of corroded metal and shattered pottery, what might have been another battery now reduced to indecipherable fragments. The iron rods inside were especially vulnerable, often rusting into nothingness long before excavation teams could reach them. Even when intact, the copper cylinders frequently oxidized into brittle green flakes, their original forms barely recognizable. But material decay isn't the only challenge. Many of these jars may have been lost to sheer misinterpretation. Early excavators, unaware of their potential significance, likely dismissed them as common storage vessels, broken pots tossed aside or discarded during digs focused on grander artifacts like statues and tablets. Imagine a warehouse in 1920s Baghdad, stacked with unstudied pottery shards, a handful of batteries hiding in plain sight among wine jugs and grain silos. Without König's keen eye in 1936, even the few surviving examples might have been overlooked forever. Even when preserved, time distorts what remains. Acidic residues evaporate, organic seals disintegrate, and contextual clues vanish. A jar found alone tells us little. One unearthed beside metalworking tools or medical instruments could have been revolutionary. But most batteries were discovered in isolation, stripped of their stories by looters or careless handling. The handful we have, fewer than a dozen confirmed specimens, represent a skewed sample, like trying to reconstruct modern life from a single fork and a light bulb. This scarcity warps our understanding in subtle ways. With so few intact batteries, we can't study variations in design or regional adaptations. Were there larger versions for temples? Miniature ones for portable use? We may never know. Each lost jar isn't just a missing artifact, it's a missing page from humanity's oldest playbook of experimentation. The Baghdad batteries that survived did so against staggering odds, and their fractured legacy reminds us how much history slips through our fingers, one corroded connection at a time. Modern science finally has the tools to crack the Baghdad Battery's secrets without risking a single crack in its fragile clay. Gone are the days when archaeologists had to chip away at artifacts or dissolve samples in acid to study them. Today, cutting-edge imaging techniques like micro-CT scanning can peer inside these ancient jars with pinpoint precision, mapping every corrosion pattern and residue deposit without ever breaking the seal. In 2019, researchers at University College London demonstrated just how powerful this approach can be. By rotating a replica battery under high-resolution X-rays, they created a three-dimensional model so detailed it revealed microscopic acid channels in the asphalt stopper, evidence that electrolytes likely seeped through intentionally designed pathways rather than leaking by accident. Material analysis has leapt forward too. Portable X-ray fluorescence devices can now identify elemental compositions by simply hovering over an object, detecting trace metals that hint at the battery's original content. In 2021, a German team used this method on an intact jar from the National Museum of Iraq, uncovering unexpected traces of citrus compounds in the copper cylinder. Could ancient artisans have experimented with lemon juice as an electrolyte? the finding suggests they might have tested multiple acidic substances, refining their recipes through trial and error. Even the iron rods are telling new stories under scanning electron microscopes. Their pitting patterns match prolonged exposure to weak acids, exactly what you'd expect from years of vinegar or wine soaking. But the real game changer may be isotopic analysis. By studying variations in lead isotopes within the asphalt seals, scientists can now trace the material's geographic origin down to specific natural seeps. Preliminary results from ongoing studies suggest some batteries used asphalt from the Hit Springs in western Iraq, a site also mentioned in Babylonian texts as a source of ritual materials. This unexpected connection raises fresh questions. Were these jars produced near sacred sites for ceremonial purposes? The answers could reshape our understanding of their cultural significance. What's most exciting is how these non-destructive methods preserve artifacts for future generations. As analytical tools grow more sophisticated, imagine nanoscale spectroscopy or AI-assisted residue mapping. Each untouched battery becomes a time capsule waiting to reveal its secrets. The British Museum recently announced plans to rescan their Baghdad Battery collection using next-generation terahertz imaging, which can detect organic residues invisible to conventional X-rays. If successful, we might finally find traces of ancient scroll wrappings or medicinal compounds locked in the clay. These technological leaps remind us that the Baghdad Battery isn't just an artifact, it's a conversation across millennia. Every scan, every spectral analysis is like decoding a message left by artisans who could never have imagined our tools, yet whose ingenuity continues to spark discovery. With each non-invasive peek beneath its surface, we're not just preserving history, we're honoring it. Every time a replica of the Baghdad Battery is built for testing, a quiet ethical dilemma hums beneath the surface, one that pits the pursuit of knowledge against the solemn duty to preserve history. Museums worldwide face this tension daily. Should fragile artifacts be handled for study, even if it risks irreversible damage, or locked away where they're safe but inaccessible to science? Take the British Museum's approach. Their original Baghdad Battery sits in a climate-controlled case, untouched by experiments, while 3D printed copies bear the brunt of modern curiosity. It's a compromise that honors preservation, but some researchers argue it comes at a cost. Without examining the authentic jars, we might miss subtle clues: fingerprints in the clay, tool marks on the copper, or organic residues invisible to scans that could finally solve the mystery. The debate sharpens when considering invasive techniques. In 2017, a team petitioned to extract microscopic samples from an intact battery's asphalt seal, hoping to analyze its molecular composition. Conservationists blocked the request, arguing that even a pinprick-sized hole could accelerate decay. Yet similar studies on less famous artifacts have yielded breakthroughs, like detecting ancient wine in Egyptian jars through residue analysis. Where do we draw the line between protection and progress? The Smithsonian's policy offers one answer. Artifacts are graded on a scale from study-ready to ultra-sensitive, with the most fragile objects studied only through imaging. But this creates a hierarchy where some relics deemed too precious to touch become untouchable puzzles. Technology promises middle ground. High-resolution CT scans now let scientists virtually dissect artifacts layer by layer, while AI can reconstruct degraded materials in simulations. When the Louvre partnered with IBM to digitize their collection, they created a virtual Baghdad Battery that visitors could disassemble with a swipe, no gloves required. Yet even these advances have limits. As one conservator noted, a scan can't smell 2,000-year-old vinegar or feel the conductivity of ancient copper. There's an intimacy to handling history that pixels can't replicate. Perhaps the most poignant conflict lies in cultural ownership. Many Iraqi archaeologists argue these jars, unearthed near Baghdad, belong in their homelands' labs and museums, not just as exhibits but as active subjects of study. In 2022, a joint German-Iraqi team pioneered a solution, bringing portable labs to the artifact rather than vice versa. By analyzing batteries in situ at the National Museum of Iraq, they balanced preservation with local scholarship. It's a model that acknowledges deeper truths, that some mysteries aren't just about what these objects were, but who they matter to now. The irony isn't lost on historians. These jars may have been everyday items to their makers, used until they broke or were tossed aside. Now they're priceless treasures, so fragile that even light can degrade them. In trying to preserve the past perfectly, we risk freezing it beyond reach. Yet every scratch on an original artifact is a sentence erased from history's manuscript. The Baghdad Battery, caught between these extremes, reminds us that conservation isn't just about saving objects, it's about safeguarding the right to ask questions, even when the answers demand we handle the unhandleable. The Baghdad Battery forces us to confront a humbling truth. Ancient civilizations were far more inventive than our modern arrogance often assumes. We like to imagine history as a straight line of progress, primitive beginnings steadily advancing toward our current technological zenith. But artifacts like these shatter that illusion, revealing pockets of ingenuity that defy linear narratives. Think about the sheer creativity required to combine everyday materials, clay, copper, iron, vinegar, into something capable of harnessing invisible energy. This wasn't accidental alchemy, it was deliberate experimentation, whether the goal was medicine, metallurgy, or mysticism. And that realization should reshape how we view every ancient innovation, from Roman concrete to Mayan astronomy. What's perhaps most striking is how these discoveries expose the fragility of knowledge itself. The Baghdad Battery's purpose was forgotten for millennia, not because the civilization that created it was backward, but because innovation isn't always cumulative. Ideas emerge, flourish in specific contexts, then vanish when those conditions change. Like sparks flickering in the wind, the Antikythera mechanism, Damascus steel, even Greek fire, all testify to technologies that rose and fell outside the main currents of history. The lesson here isn't just about lost inventions, it's about how much we still don't know and how many modern breakthroughs might actually be rediscoveries. This mystery also underscores the dangers of projecting our own frameworks onto the past. For decades, scholars debated whether the Baghdad Battery was a tool or a toy, a medical device or a ritual object. But what if those categories didn't exist for its creators? Ancient societies didn't rigidly separate science, religion, and art the way we do. A jar that tingled when touched might have been equally practical and sacred, a healer's instrument one day, a priest's talisman the next. Our insistence on labeling it reflects our own compartmentalized thinking, not theirs. Ultimately, the greatest value of the Baghdad Battery may lie in the questions it raises rather than the answers it provides. It reminds us that curiosity is timeless, that people 2,000 years ago were just as captivated by the mysteries of their world as we are today. Every time we uncover an artifact like this, we're not just studying history, we're joining a conversation across centuries, one that began with someone holding a clay jar and wondering, what if? That's the real gift of these ancient enigmas. They don't just teach us about the past, they teach us how to wonder. Even after decades of study, the Baghdad Battery remains swathed in unanswered questions, each one a tantalizing thread waiting to be pulled. Take the missing components, for instance. If these were truly functional batteries, where are the wires, connectors, or conductive pathways needed to complete a circuit? No excavations have uncovered accompanying tools that would link multiple jars in series, nor any artifacts resembling applicators for medical or electroplating use. The absence is deafening. Were these elements made from perishable materials like plant fibers or animal sinew, long since dissolved by time, or does their absence hint that we've misunderstood the jar's purpose entirely? Then there's the enigma of instructions. Ancient Mesopotamians were meticulous record keepers. etching everything from grain taxes to star charts onto clay tablets. Yet not a single cuneiform text mentions these devices. No recipes for electrolytes, no temple inventories listing shocking jars, no artisan manuals describing their assembly. This silence could mean the knowledge was deliberately guarded, passed down orally among initiates, but it's equally possible we're misreading the artifacts altogether, projecting modern expectations onto objects that served a humbler, forgotten role. The biggest unsolved riddle might be distribution. Why have these jars only been found in a handful of sites near Baghdad? If they were revolutionary tools, why no wider adoption across Mesopotamia's trade networks? Their scarcity suggests they were either experimental prototypes, regional quirks, or objects so specialized that only a few communities ever needed them. Imagine stumbling upon a single smartphone 2,000 years from now without context. You'd never grasp its ubiquity in our era. The Baghdad Battery could represent a similar blind spot, its true significance lost because we found only fragments of a larger puzzle. Future research offers hope, but only if disciplines collaborate. Chemists could analyze residue traces with hyperspectral imaging, pinpointing exact electrolyte compositions. Engineers might reconstruct period-accurate wiring from materials like flax or silver thread, testing how ancient artisans could have connected multiple cells. Archaeologists, meanwhile, could re-excavate original discovery sites with ground-penetrating radar, searching for overlooked companion artifacts. Even linguists have a role, scouring neglected texts for oblique references to tingling vessels or sacred currents. The most exciting frontier lies in artificial intelligence. Machine learning algorithms are now capable of cross-referencing global artifact databases, spotting patterns humans might miss. Could an AI trained on thousands of electrochemical objects from diverse cultures identify a Babylonian battery's distant cousins? Projects like the British Museum's EOT of History initiative are already linking collections worldwide, creating digital threads that might someday connect these jars to broader technological traditions. Solving this mystery won't belong to any single field. It demands the collective curiosity of historians, scientists, and craftsmen, a reunion of the very disciplines the ancients never divided. Every unanswered question is an invitation to look deeper, to question assumptions, and to embrace the thrilling possibility that the past still holds surprises capable of rewiring our understanding of human ingenuity. The Baghdad Battery isn't just an artifact, it's a conversation starter across centuries, and we've only just begun to listen. The Baghdad Battery stands as a testament to the gaps in our understanding of the ancient world, a humble clay jar that refuses to fit neatly into the timelines we've constructed. It challenges the assumption that innovation follows a straight path, forcing us to reckon with the possibility that knowledge can emerge, flourish, and vanish without a trace. Whether it was a healer's tool, a craftsman's experiment, or a priest's sacred object, its very existence whispers that history is far messier and far more fascinating than textbooks suggest. What makes this artifact so compelling isn't just the mystery of its purpose, but what it reveals about our own relationship with the past. We're quick to label ancient civilizations as primitive or advanced, but the truth is they were neither. They were simply human, grappling with the same curiosities and limitations we do today. The Baghdad Battery reminds us that progress isn't a ladder but a labyrinth, full of dead ends and forgotten shortcuts. So the next time you hear a story about the first invention, the first light bulb, the first battery, the first computer, pause and wonder, was it really the first? Or just the first we've found? Beneath the deserts, jungles, and ocean floors lie countless undiscovered artifacts, each with the potential to rewrite history. The Baghdad Battery might be one of 1,000 such secrets waiting for the right hand to unearth them. What other surprises might be buried just out of sight? Could there be lost technologies, brilliant in their simplicity, still hidden in the soil? The only way to find out is to keep digging, both literally and figuratively. And that's where you come in. Share your wildest theories in the comments. What do you think these jars were truly for? Could they have powered something we've yet to imagine? Or are we missing a clue that's been right in front of us all along? History isn't a closed book. It's a puzzle with half the pieces still missing, and every new discovery is a chance to snap another into place. The past is speaking. Are we listening?